Some moments change everything. A single look can awaken something that's been quiet for years. A touch can feel destined, as if the universe itself is guiding every movement. And then there are nights where time bends, where every kiss, every breath, every heartbeat blends passion and tenderness into a memory that will last forever. Even when the sun rises, the warmth lingers, and the soul remembers what the body already knows. Here we explore the kind of love that doesn't fade, that defies logic and lingers long after the night ends. Stories that aren't just told, they're felt, lived, and carried deep inside. Welcome to this channel where every story pulls at the heart, awakens desire, and reminds us what it truly means to be seen, desired, and loved beyond the moment. It began with a glance that shouldn't have held any weight, the kind of look that could have been shrugged off, dismissed, or forgotten. But it didn't fade. It lingered. There was something in the way his eyes caught the light, the subtle curve of his mouth when he smiled without thinking, the ease of his posture that seemed to occupy more space than the room allowed. In that instant, it felt as if the world had shifted slightly, imperceptibly, yet undeniably, towards something neither of us had planned or anticipated. The first words came easily, casual, almost mundane, but they carried an undercurrent of electricity that hummed beneath the surface. A laugh shared over some trivial joke became more than laughter. It became the bridge between two worlds that weren't meant to collide but had, anyway. Each gesture, each tilt of the head, each brush of a hand against a sleeve felt charged with unspoken meaning. There was an awareness in every movement, a kind of magnetic inevitability that whispered, "This is not ordinary." It wasn't about lust or desire in its rawest form. It was something subtler, yet infinitely more consuming. Desire, like this, is patient. It doesn't announce itself with noise or urgency. It seeps in quietly, taking root in the unguarded corners of the heart and mind, lingering where logic tells you to tread lightly. There was a pull that was impossible to resist, a force that seemed to exist beyond choice, beyond circumstance. Every glance, every accidental touch, every fleeting brush of proximity felt predetermined, as if some hidden script of the universe had written this encounter long before either of us knew it was coming. The room itself seemed to fade into insignificance. The hum of conversation around us dimmed, the clatter of cups and chairs softened, leaving only the unspoken tension that thrummed between us. Every moment carried the weight of possibility, each pause pregnant with what could be, each smile a silent promise that words would never fully capture. It was a strange, beautiful contradiction, a fire that could not be named but could be felt with every heartbeat, every shiver that traced the spine, every tightening of the chest that whispered, "Pay attention, this is important." And then there were the touches, small, almost accidental, yet loaded with meaning. Fingers brushing when reaching for the same glass, a hand lingering momentarily on the back of a chair, shoulders brushing as we passed through narrow spaces. Each contact was a spark, invisible but electric, leaving traces that lingered long after the moment passed. It wasn't physical in a way that could be rushed. It was intimate in the sense that intimacy requires, patient, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Every nerve felt alive, every sense heightened, every breath measured against the quiet rhythm of the other. The conversation, too, became a dance, not because we tried to impress or seduce, but because every sentence, every laugh, every shared memory carried an unspoken depth. The mundane became meaningful, the casual exchange became sacred. It was in the way his voice lingered in the air, the way a simple glance toward the window or a tilt of the head seemed designed solely to draw attention, to hold it, to pull the world closer so that nothing existed beyond the space we occupied together. Time itself seemed to bend. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, yet the night had only just begun. There was no need to define it, no need to name it, because the presence alone was enough. It filled the senses, occupied the thoughts, claimed the quiet corners of the mind that had long been left untouched. It was undeniable, unstoppable, yet subtle, as if the universe itself had slowed to let this connection take root. Even as parting drew near, there was a weight in the chest that refused to lift. The lingering looks, the almost touching hands, the way voices softened when saying goodbye, it all left a mark, a residue of something forbidden yet beautiful. There was no guilt in it, no shame, only the bittersweet ache of realizing that something extraordinary had begun without permission, without warning, without asking for approval. It is remarkable how one glance, one laugh, one shared space can ignite a fire that doesn't burn and consume, but warms and persists. How a single night, or even a single moment, can rewrite the quiet rules of the heart, leaving traces that linger, unseen yet palpable, like the aftertaste of a song that refuses to leave the mind. That spark, forbidden or not, remains, quietly shaping every thought, every hope, every longing that follows. And in the silence after the first meeting, there is a knowledge that what began with a glance is only the start of something neither expected, yet neither could deny. Some sparks are forbidden, and that is what makes them unforgettable. It started as something quiet, almost imperceptible, but it grew with every glance, every shared laugh, every brush of hands that lingered a second too long. There was a pull there, a force neither logic nor loyalty could explain. It wasn't reckless, not at first. It was subtle, insidious in the way it worked its way into the spaces of thought, weaving itself into the corners of ordinary days until it became impossible to ignore. Each smile shared across the room carried more than amusement. It carried recognition, the unspoken acknowledgement of something forbidden yet undeniable. There was electricity in the silence, a tension that pulsed in every space between words. Conversations that should have been casual became loaded with undercurrents of desire. Every time hands brushed, even accidentally, it sent a jolt that lingered long after the moment had passed. That brief contact was enough to awaken a storm that neither wanted to name but both could feel. The pull didn't demand action, it demanded awareness, even when laughter covered it, even when distance tried to keep it contained, it waited patiently. There was a sense of inevitability in every meeting, as if the universe itself had drawn a line that could not be crossed without consequence, yet must be followed. It was magnetic in the purest sense, bending attention, thoughts, and heartbeats toward a single presence, pulling inescapably. Every secret smile carried weight, each shared glance, lingering just long enough to make the heart skip a beat, built a tension that was almost unbearable. There was joy in it, a reckless delight in acknowledging something that could not be spoken aloud. But there was also fear, the kind that sharpens awareness and quickens the pulse, because deep down both knew this connection broke rules, crossed boundaries that had been carefully set, that awareness only made the attraction more potent, more consuming, like fire hidden under ice. Time seemed to stretch and compress in the presence of this pull. Minutes could feel like hours when proximity brought hearts in quiet rhythm, and yet hours could vanish in what felt like a fleeting glance. The mind wanted to rationalize, to step back and maintain control, but the body and the soul refused to comply. Awareness of the consequences only heightened the tension, sharpening every sensation, making every touch, no matter how accidental, feel heavier. The air itself seemed charged when near each other. Even a passing brush of shoulders in a crowded space set nerves alight. That fleeting contact left traces, a tremor in the chest, a catch in the breath, a flush of warmth that lingered far longer than it should. And every time eyes met, there was a silent recognition of what had passed and what was waiting, a delicate balance of longing and restraint that made each encounter electric. There were nights replayed in memory, quiet moments that felt clandestine, yet sacred. Lying awake, the mind would trace the lines of hands, the warmth of a gaze, the curve of a smile, as though memorizing something forbidden that could never be claimed openly. Desire, in its purest form, was not casual or fleeting. It was deliberate, consuming, unrelenting. And in that consumption there was clarity. The connection was real, undeniable, and profound, even if the world insisted it could not exist. Every encounter left traces long after the moment passed. The smallest gesture, a hand resting a little longer, a whisper too soft, a shared look full of meaning, echoed in the spaces of thought, in the heartbeat, in the quiet hours of reflection. It was a fire that did not destroy but illuminated, showing what the heart had longed for without admitting it, giving form to a desire that neither time nor circumstance could erase. There was a strange intimacy in restraint, in knowing that even the smallest act carried weight. Each smile, each brush of hands, each whispered word became a secret ritual, a silent testament to the intensity of the connection. And with each ritual, the pull grew stronger, more magnetic, more impossible to resist, until it became clear that what existed was larger than rules, larger than fear, larger than the world itself. In the end, there was no denying it. Every glance, every touch, every shared breath had left a mark deeper than memory. It was not about surrendering recklessly or giving in blindly. It was about acknowledging the force that had been present from the start, the inevitability that could not be avoided, the desire that defied logic and rules alike. Some connections arrive quietly, almost by accident, and then grow until they cannot be contained. This was one of them, and once it was known, it could never be forgotten. It starts quietly, almost imperceptibly, with a thought that lingers too long. One glance, one memory, and suddenly the heart is a battlefield. Every heartbeat carries a question it cannot answer. Every breath weighs heavier than the last. Loving someone you shouldn't is not simple. It's a paradox that feels like both ecstasy and punishment at the same time. There is the thrill, the rush of knowing that this connection is forbidden, yet undeniable. But alongside it comes guilt, a twisting ache that curls around the ribs and refuses to let go. Every moment together becomes a mixture of joy and dread. The laugh that once felt like sunlight now carries shadows. The touch that once comforted suddenly sparks tremors of anxiety because the mind knows boundaries, but the heart refuses to obey. Memory and desire collide in a relentless loop, each recollection of closeness igniting both longing and self-reproach. Even when apart, the storm continues. Thoughts spiral in endless circles. Did this begin too soon? Could it ever last? Was it wrong to feel so alive in another's presence? Every plan made, every word spoken, is weighed against an invisible scale of right and wrong. Sleep becomes restless because the mind replays every small interaction. The tilt of a head, the softness of a hand, the intensity of a gaze, and each replay strengthens the pull, even as it intensifies the guilt. There is no escape from it. Morning light doesn't bring relief. It only illuminates the tension that lingers in quiet corners of the room. Work, errands, conversation, all fade into the background compared to the inner turbulence. And yet, the more the heart wrestles, the more it finds itself drawn again, as if pulled by some force that defies reason. Desire and conscience become two voices that speak over each other, neither silenced, both demanding attention. Even small interactions are laden with significance. A shared glance across a room, a brush of hands, a soft laugh. They are magnified into moments of profound meaning, moments that make the storm grow more intense. The world outside continues, indifferent, while the internal struggle takes center stage. And there is a strange beauty in it too, in the recognition that the intensity of feeling is unmatched by anything else experienced. The pain and the longing testify to the depth of the connection, to the power it holds over the heart, Confession is impossible. Restraint is a daily battle. To speak would be to risk everything, yet to remain silent is to carry the weight of yearning in solitude. The heart aches for touch, for presence, for acknowledgement, but every expression of love carries a sting, a reminder that the feeling exists in a space where it is not fully allowed. Each encounter becomes a test, an exercise in control, in the quiet art of balancing emotion with restraint. The storm inside is both relentless and tender. There is rage at oneself for being unable to follow rules, but there is also tenderness for the soul of the other, for the way their existence alone brings warmth to cold places inside. There is guilt, yes, but there is gratitude too for the moments shared, for the laughter, for the silent understanding that exists even without words. It is a paradox that makes every second sharper, every heartbeat more pronounced. And in the quietest moments, when the world is still, the tumult settles just enough for reflection. One realizes that love, even when forbidden, does not diminish the self. It reveals layers previously unseen. The longing, the guilt, the yearning. They are not weaknesses but proof of living fully, feeling fully. Each storm, as exhausting as it is, uncovers truths that otherwise might never have been discovered. The capacity to love deeply, the ability to endure emotional fire, the recognition that some connections are written too profoundly to be ignored. Even though the heart is twisted in conflicting directions, it is alive in a way that nothing else can produce. There is clarity hidden in the chaos, the acknowledgement that some love is as much a challenge as it is a gift, and that the torment itself becomes a teacher. Every pang, every restless thought, every moment of weakness is part of a story that cannot be untold, a story that leaves an indelible mark on the soul. Some storms rage long after the wind has passed, and this one would linger in memory, in every breath, in every quiet corner of the heart. Because sometimes the love that shouldn't exist is the love that cannot be forgotten. Even knowing the boundaries, the connection refused to loosen its grip. It wasn't a reckless, fleeting pull that could be brushed aside. It was a quiet insistence that lingered in every corner of thought, every pause between tasks, every breath that carried a memory too vivid to ignore. The moments shared were few and fragile, but each one was heavy with meaning. A glance across a crowded room, a brush of fingers while passing by, a whispered word in a crowded hallway. They were tiny sparks, but they left fire behind. The mind tried to contain it, to place it neatly into the box of what could or couldn't be, but the heart ignored those divisions. Every stolen conversation played in the mind like a melody you can't turn off, and every smile that had been exchanged was etched into memory with the precision of something sacred. It was the kind of bond that didn't follow rules, didn't heed caution, and didn't require justification. It simply existed, quietly persistent, demanding to be felt fully. Even in silence it spoke, in the pause before a message was answered, in the way footsteps slowed when near, in the flutter that rose unbidden at the thought of him. It was an echo that refused to fade. There was a recognition in the way hearts moved in tandem, even when separated by walls, time, or circumstance. That kind of connection doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for the world to approve. It just lingers quietly, profoundly, irrevocably. The nights became a canvas for reflection. Thoughts replayed in vivid detail. Laughter shared under dim light. The warmth of a shoulder brushed by accident. The unspoken understanding in a gaze that said everything words could not. Even when the hours of the day demanded attention elsewhere, the mind returned to those moments, tracing them with the care of someone afraid to lose what had already been imprinted on the soul. Every heartbeat seemed to carry a fragment of that connection. Walking through familiar streets, hearing a certain song, feeling a sudden shift in air temperatures, small things became reminders of a closeness that refused to dissipate. There was no need for touch, for speech, for explanation. The body remembered, the mind remembered and the soul remembered, carrying the weight of shared time like a secret treasure. It wasn't about possession or claim. It was about acknowledgement, about the quiet truth that some bonds cannot be erased by distance, circumstance, or reason. They exist beyond control, beyond expectation, beyond the tidy confines of what is convenient. It is the kind of love that remains when the world insists it should have passed, that insists upon its own reality simply by being present in thought and memory. Even ordinary moments held significance. A look across a room became charged with unspoken meaning. A simple greeting felt electric. There was a tension that was both unbearable and beautiful, the kind that made every encounter feel like it could alter the course of everything, yet never demanded recklessness. Boundaries were understood, yet the connection weaved its quiet, persistent thread through each day. The passage of time did nothing to diminish its presence. Months could separate encounters, but the impact lingered as if every shared glance, every fleeting touch, had been carefully recorded within. And though circumstances sometimes demanded restraint, the bond didn't weaken. It grew, subtle and unseen, feeding on anticipation, memory, and the unspoken promise that this connection was not accidental. It was in the quiet moments that the weight of it became most apparent. A sigh in solitude, a shiver at an unexpected touch of memory, a smile that arose unbidden while recalling the sound of laughter shared. These were proof that it had taken root in a way nothing else could replicate. It was a presence felt more than seen, a warmth that persisted after the fire of the encounter had cooled, a pulse that carried meaning long after the body and mind had moved on. Even knowing the boundaries, even understanding that some moments could never be repeated, the connection refused to fade. It left an imprint too deep for time or circumstance to erase, a reminder that some experiences are eternal not because of their duration, but because of their intensity and truth. And in the quiet acceptance of that enduring presence, it became clear that some loves do not end. They only take root quietly, persistently, indelibly. If this story stirred something inside, let it live there. For more unforgettable journeys of love, longing, and soul, deep connection, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Here, every story is an experience you can feel, and every heartbeat is just the beginning.